Good morning, staff, and we are here for another brief meeting on another hot topic in education, and that is ability-based instruction. And we're going to be talking today about exactly what that entails, as well as what does it come with as far as tracking of students and looking at some of the pros and cons of ability-based instruction. And really, ability-based instruction, the objective behind it is that it's really to group the same level of students together, so that way they are all working at the same pace. Whether we are grouping the highest achieving, middle achieving, or lowest ability in one group for the next. We want the overall goal is to make sure we have light groups working together, so they're working at their pace at all times, and that's really what we're looking for, and really also monitoring progress throughout their time with those groups when it comes to that. And really, ability-based instruction, I think, is really probably taken off once again over the last 5 years or so. In the 1980s and into the 90s, it was one of the more popular things to do, but it's since kind of gone away. Just like a lot of things in education come and go, this one really seems to be coming on once again with that. As a matter of fact, in a study taken by the National Assessment of Educational Progress, 71% of fourth grade teachers surveyed in around 2009 had utilized reading ability grouping, keeping like reading students in the same group. That was up 28% since 1998. So once again, we're seeing an instance there where we're seeing a steady increase in those numbers. Tom Lovelace from the Brookings Institution did another study with math and found that 61% of fourth grade teachers around the same time frame, back around 2010, when they were surveyed, had also used math ability grouping, which was up 40% since 1996. So we're seeing a lot of increase in ability-based instruction. So it kind of tells us where education is going here. Now, along with that, there's, like any topic we talked about with Common Core last week and some other topics, there's always some positives and negatives to take a look at. And I just want you to be aware of some of those, because ability-based instruction is something that most of you are probably familiar with, but it's important to note what are some things that I believe, or that we take a look at it saying, hey, this is a positive outcome from this. What are maybe some negatives with it? I think number one, when it comes to positives, I think is the fact that we can keep students at the same ability level and working at their own pace. I think that's a major positive ability-based instruction. Not to worry about having a low ability, high ability, and those low ability students not able to keep up, or high ability having to fall behind because of other students that aren't quite up to their level. Well, to keep all the students in the same pace, working together, and I think it makes the classroom that much better, and it makes it easier on the teacher, because even though they're working at the same level, they can still differentiate a little bit easier. I think that's really important, because the ultimate goal that we want for any student is we want them to work at their pace and also be successful. So that's really important for what we want to achieve here, and I think it's all that much more important, ability grouping as well. Another one is that it allows us to put higher ability learners with other higher ability learners. Especially in the elementary, we do a lot of ability grouping. We're able to group together high ability learners, and that allows them to work at more of an accelerated pace. So that way we're pushing those students, we're challenging those students on a daily basis, not letting them just work at at something that they're not a pace that they can do more at. So we want to make sure we continue to push them and give them work that's going to accelerate them and push them and challenge at all times. That's really important. A lot of times, high ability learners, they get kind of a bad rap, mainly because they might be causing problems, but it's not because they want to be troublemakers, because they're bored, and we want to make sure we avoid any of those issues. And I think one other thing, and it's kind of a two-part deal here, but I think when we take a look at ability grouping, it leads to tracking of students, and I think a lot of us would agree there's positives with that as well, but I think in this case it can be a positive, because we're tracking and monitoring progress, so we can see, okay, are these students making enough gains to the fact they can move up a group, or we need to bring them down and slow them down a little bit, and those sorts of things here. So I think tracking in this case can be positive. A lot of us, I think, would agree there's some negatives with students becoming labeled and things with tracking as well that maybe aren't so good. Now, like I said, there's some positives, but there's also negatives. I think there's some downfalls with ability grouping and things we have to be very careful of as education professionals here when it comes down to it. One of those first things is sometimes ability grouping can give students and parents kind of a false sense of security. For instance, you have a student that scores a 95% in math. They're in a low ability group, scoring 95%, versus a high ability learner scores 86%. Okay, and basically, what does that really tell us? So we have a high ability learner who's basically 9 points lower than a low ability learner. So does that mean that low ability learner is getting more out of it? Does that mean that high ability learner is not getting as much? That can be kind of a false sense as to where's my student really at overall in the classroom. So to be very, very careful of that and really define what that student's working on, so we know, kind of there's no confusion on where that student really is as compared to others. Another negative as far as ability grouping is that sometimes, so we talk about labeling, and that can be something very, very we have to be very careful of, especially as we get into the older stages of elementary and the middle school. Students who become labeled, that can become a self-esteem issue, and they become down on themselves, become negative, and all of a sudden now they're not working anywhere near what they're capable of. So to be very, very careful not to damage that early, and really make sure we push them and they find success and they excel in the classroom no matter what ability group they are in, low, middle, high, no matter what it is. So we have to promote positivity and not allow that negativity to set in, even though they might be continuing a lower group, and make them successful. Also, there's a lot of critics with ability grouping that really state that socioeconomic class and status students continue to be in those lower ability groups, mainly because teachers, as I said, will whether subconsciously or consciously, will not provide as many resources for those students. And I think that's something that research may have some things to say with that, but we have to be very, very careful that we're not grouping those types of students together. We don't want those issues to be a reason why those students aren't able to excel and move up in groups based on where they need to be. But I think that is definitely something that is there, something that we talk about, and it's important to note. So just so we're aware of that. And really, I think one of the biggest downfalls with ability grouping comes to standardized testing and students getting the necessary standards to be successful. We've talked a lot about already in previous meetings about high stakes testing and how the standards are so important and how we're being graded, all those different things. And I think that the problem with a lot of ability grouping is, let's say you have a third grade student reading out of a first grade book, okay, and they have to take the third grade NISA test in reading, and they haven't touched anything in regards to third grade standards. That becomes a major issue because those students are not able to then understand the standards and become successful because they're missing out on all those standards over a year's time. So I think that's a major concern, and we're seeing, and here at West Point we're very familiar. We have some low achieving students, low test scores because we're not able to get them with the standards. So that's something we got to keep in mind, and we got to find a way to curb that a little bit and try to find a way to close that gap as it pertains to standards with ability grouping. So as we went through that, there's a lot of things once again out there with education. I think ability grouping is one of those things, just like Common Core, direct instruction, all those things there. There's a lot of things going on in education, a lot of hot topics, and I want it to continue to be so as we go through the coming year's education. Just hope you're aware of some of those things, and I appreciate your time this morning. Have a wonderful rest of your day and week. Thank you.